Hello everyone, Scott here from Pillow. Today I'm going to be discussing the coronavirus and how it's definitely going to affect the service accommodation industry and the holiday home industry here in the UK. Now, as I record this, it's the 3rd of March, and even by the time you see this video, it could have all blown over and all be sorted, or the world could be on fire. We don't know what's going to be happening, but day after day after day, there's more cases being released, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Now, this isn't about scaremongers. If you're like me, I'm very positive. I don't think all this is going to be a big problem and it's perhaps an overreaction, but it doesn't matter what I think. It's what other governments think, airlines, event organisers, tourists. It's what everyone else thinks, and they make the decisions that affect our industry here in the UK. Now, Pillow is a management company, manage hundreds and hundreds of properties, and the worst case scenario for us probably is tens of millions of pounds worth of lost revenue for our owners as a collective. So it's something we are looking at internally and making plans for, but I wanted to make a video for the wider community with just a couple of points to consider. So again, it isn't down to my opinion in this, it's what happens externally, things like governments, the NHS. Things will happen out with our control, and it's already having effect on our industry. So the first thing to consider, point number one, is overseas guests. Now, certain areas are quarantined, you can't get out, you can't get in, so this will definitely have an effect. It is definitely having an effect in some of the areas that deal with cruise and tourist areas like that. So we are seeing occupancy rates dropping, not for us, but I do keep an eye on the community. So some areas are definitely seeing overseas guests cancel. Now, whether they make the choice to cancel or whether they don't have a choice, i.e. they can't get out, flights are cancelled, government shut things down, they're in self-quarantine, you will see a dramatic drop in overseas guests, depending where those guests come from. If you're getting guests from China, for example, then it's inevitable that you will see some cancelled bookings. Number two is people staying in the UK, because if the whole world shuts down, and perhaps the UK is okay, then that might be a positive for the industry, because people can't go to even Italy, there's flights cancelled to Dublin, can't go to all of these places that they were going to, but they still want a holiday, so they stay in the UK and staycation more. So perhaps that offsets people going to overseas and they can't come in, but they stay here. So perhaps it's a good thing for your area and your property. And again, service accommodation is a wide range. We're talking city centre apartments, holiday cottages. So different types of properties will be affected differently. So UK staycations might actually be a good thing for us, and what we lose in overseas guests coming in, we gain from people staying here in the UK. Further on for that, point number three to think about is events. Now, if you look at things in America, they've cancelled lots of big tech events where, tens of thousands of people go. So big events are being cancelled in some areas of the world, and you think the NEC, the Excel Centre, music events, these things aren't getting cancelled in the UK yet, but they might. And what if your service accommodation unit relies heavily on guests going to events and conferences? Then if you start seeing these things being affected and things being cancelled, which they aren't as I record this, but they might, then that might have an effect on your business. So again, plan ahead for that. Next thing to consider is quarantine. So what happens if someone is in your property and they self-quarantine or get told to quarantine for 14 days? How would you react to that? So one of our guests, I won't say where, said, we're going to self-quarantine for 4 days. Can we stay in your property for 14 extra days? We said yes, we gave them the rate, but we charged them a really big cleaning fee to totally nuke that place when they moved out. They were happy with that, but that happened to be fine for that property because there was no other guests coming in, or we moved a few. But what happens if somebody's in your property for a weekend and then need to self-quarantine for 14 days? Yes, you could get that revenue, but service accommodation rates being what they are, what if they don't have the money to do that? What if they were meant to be going home and they say, I can't go home, they're stuck in your apartment? How would you handle that? Because you're going to need to go and throw them out, and then you can be in the media and people saying service accommodation or Airbnb, rogue Airbnb agent throws poor people out onto streets spreading virus, and you know how the media would react to that. Or do you let them stay there? But perhaps they do the money. And again, it could be a positive because you could have quarantine type places where you know you can put them in for 14 days and you have the occupancy. So again, it might be a good thing. But some people are self-quarantining in our properties, and I've seen it happening in other areas out with the UK. So you need a procedure, you need a standard operating procedure to say how do you handle that if your guests are there, because the chances are they're not going to be there for 2 weeks and just pay you the full rate that you would normally get. So you need to think about how that's going to affect your business. And the last thing is operational. I'm going to focus on cleaners here because as entrepreneurs, I could look, it doesn't matter if coronavirus is happening, if I looked out the window and there was a zombie apocalypse, I would still need to go to work. I don't have the luxury of saying I'm not going to run the business. So me personally, it doesn't matter, zombie apocalypse, carnage, riots in the street, I am leaving to go to work and running Pillow. But if cleaners have the choice and there's an outbreak in your city and a cleaner needs to go in there, they're faced with the choice of, I'm going to go in there, clean that apartment where there's perhaps been an outbreak nearby and take the coronavirus back to my elderly relatives or my children. They're probably going to self-select out of taking that job. So you could be fine in the fact that you've got guests, but your cleaners might not want to clean that, or you don't want to clean it yourself because you're putting yourself in harm's way. So be aware from an operational point of view, cleaners might not be able to clean your apartment. So you might have lots of guests, but you can't get them cleaned. You might need to go and do it yourself. So perhaps you get backup cleaners, perhaps you get friends and family to help, perhaps you put the time in to do it yourself. But if things do go a little bit pear-shaped in the UK, then us as entrepreneurs and service accommodation operators would perhaps put ourselves in harm's way, especially if we're starting to fall below the break-even point. We will go and clean my properties, we will go and who cares about coronavirus? I have a business to run. I don't have the luxury of saying no. But cleaners might make the decision not to clean your apartments and put themselves in danger. And again, that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying they're wrong for that, but be aware your operational side might be affected. So here's some things about the coronavirus. It's not scaremongering. There's some good and bad points. One overarching thing to say is perhaps if the worst case scenario you are planning for is to have your low winter occupancy rates and just assume that those rates are going to continue over the summer, then that's probably the worst case scenario we're going to get. And if you can still break even with your kind of low occupancy winter rates, then you kind of just need to see this out, because if things start getting quarantined in other countries, it's out with our control. If governments start saying do not travel here and other governments say do not leave the country, then we are going to have a low occupancy summer. And again, not scaremongering, we just need to prepare our clients for that, make sure they've got their finances in place, make sure Pillow do what we can to make things run if things start to deteriorate in this country. But it's definitely going to affect your service accommodation business. If it continues, chances are it'll continue slightly. We don't know, no one knows, but it's definitely going to have some effect on your properties if you're in those areas. So definitely things to think about. Do your own forward planning, and if you're a client of Pillow, we'll be sending you stuff out very soon.